May 8th, 1942. The Coral Sea. The morning light cuts through drifting smoke. The USS Yorktown, pride of the Pacific Fleet, lies wounded. Her flight deck is torn open, twisted steel glowing red from fire. The smell of burning fuel mixes with salt air and cordite. Every few seconds, a new explosion echoes deep inside her hull, like the heartbeat of a dying giant. Sailors stagger through blackened corridors, boots slipping on oil-slick decks. One man drags a fire hose, another hauls the wounded toward the open light. Above them, the ocean sky swarms with fading contrails, white scars of the first great carrier battle in history. Overhead, Japanese dive bombers peel away toward the clouds. Their radio chatter crackles through the static. One carrier confirmed sunk, Yorktown destroyed. But they are wrong. Below the smoke, pumps thrum. Damage control teams work shoulder to shoulder, sealing bulkheads, fighting to keep her afloat. In the engine room, Chief Machinist's mate Donald McLeod wipes diesel from his eyes and yells over the roar, "Keep her breathing!" The list, 26 degrees port, slowly eases. Water drains from the hangar deck. Flames hiss out one by one. Yorktown is not dying quietly. Out on the bridge, Captain Elliot Buckmaster watches the horizon. His ship, still bleeding, still burning, begins to answer her helm. The star-spangled banner flutters, tattered but defiant, above the ruined island tower. For a moment, the vast Pacific seems to fall silent. No engines, no guns, only the sound of leaking oil hitting water in steady, rhythmic drops. Each one counts the seconds she might have left. Yet beneath that silence, something stirs. Not surrender, determination. In 72 hours, the world will see a ship that refuses to die. She was supposed to be gone forever. Instead, she will return at Midway, reborn from fire and steel. This is the story of the carrier that came back from the dead. The miracle of the Yorktown. The Coral Sea, May 1942. The battle had raged for 2 days, a storm of steel and smoke across 700 miles of open ocean. For the first time in history, two navies fought without ever seeing each other. Carriers launching squadrons into the clouds, striking at enemies beyond the horizon. The United States lost the Lexington, her deck split by fire and explosions. The Yorktown survived, but barely. 3 bombs had punched through her decks, crippling power, smashing her radar, and killing dozens. She limped toward Pearl Harbor, leaking oil and hope. On the Japanese side, the victory seemed clear. Radio Tokyo declared triumph. 2 American carriers destroyed. The enemy's strength in the Pacific is broken. Pilots returning to the carrier Shokaku celebrated, certain that America's last line of defense had gone under. In Tokyo, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, saw an opening. With America's carriers gone, he believed the Pacific would belong to Japan by summer. His next target, a tiny atoll halfway between Hawaii and Asia, Midway. If Japan took it, the American fleet would be forced back to California. The war could end before the year was out. But the Japanese had miscounted. Only one carrier was truly lost. Yorktown still floated, battered but alive. Thousands of miles away, at Pearl Harbor Naval Base, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, studied the reports. The codebreakers had already warned him. Japan was coming for Midway. He would need 3 carriers to stand a chance: Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown. But Yorktown, his third pillar, was broken. On May 27th, the ship finally crawled into Pearl Harbor. Her hull was scarred black, engines sputtering, decks holed through like paper. Dockyard engineers crowded along the pier, shaking their heads. The estimate, 90 days to make her seaworthy. Nimitz said nothing for a moment. Then he looked up from the report and simply answered, "You have 3? 3 days. Not 3 weeks. Not 3 months. 72 hours to rebuild a warship weighing more than 25,000 tons. Word spread through the shipyard like a spark through oil. Welders, riggers, machinists, and electricians, men still smelling of salt and diesel, lined up before dawn. Their faces were hollow with exhaustion. Many had family lost at Pearl just 6 months before. Now they had a chance to strike back, not with bullets, but with steel. By sunrise, the air around Dry Dock 1 roared with cutting torches and the rhythmic clang of hammers. Cranes swung steel plates through smoke. Sparks showered like meteors as workers patched the wounds of the Yorktown. The clock had started. Every hour mattered. Across the Pacific, Yamamoto finalized his battle plan. 4 Japanese carriers would ambush what he believed was a crippled enemy fleet. He called it Operation M1, the decisive strike. He never imagined that by the time his planes reached Midway, the ghost of the Yorktown would already be waiting. This was no ordinary repair. It was a resurrection. A race between men and time, between defeat and destiny. What happened next would rewrite the story of the Pacific War. In 3 days, a ship marked for the grave would rise again. May 27, 1942. Pearl Harbor Naval Yard. The harbor is still scarred from December's flames. Oil stains the water. Cranes hang over half-sunken wrecks now turned into training hulks. And then, through the haze of diesel and salt, she appears, USS Yorktown, limping home from the Coral Sea. Her once smooth hull is gashed wide open, paint scorched, antennae twisted, elevators frozen mid-deck. The ship lists slightly, groaning as tugs guide her into Dry Dock number 1. From a distance, she looks less like a warship and more like a wounded whale, black smoke rising from open wounds. The dock workers fall silent. Some remove their caps, others whistle low. One man mutters, "She's done." But she isn't. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz arrives that afternoon. His uniform is spotless, but the look in his eyes is all exhaustion. A man carrying the Pacific on his shoulders. Alongside him walks Captain Elliot Buckmaster, Yorktown's commanding officer, still limping from Coral Sea injuries, and Claude Gillette, the shipyard superintendent, a man known for building miracles out of broken metal. They step onto the battered deck. Under their boots, plates bend and creak. Smoke drifts upward from still hot seams. The air smells of burned oil and salt. Nimitz doesn't speak at first. He looks down the length of the flight deck, where bomb craters have torn through the planks like open craters on a battlefield. Finally, he turns to Gillette. Can it be done? Gillette studies the wreck for a long moment, then pulls a welding glove from his pocket. His voice is steady, low. "We'll work until the torches melt, Admiral." That's all Nimitz needs to hear. He nods once, sharp. "Then you have 3 days. 3 days. 72 hours to raise a carrier from the dead." Word spreads through the base before sunset. Every welder, rigger, pipe fitter, and electrician hears it. Men on leave cancel their plans. Some veterans from the battleship Arizona volunteer. They remember what it meant to lose a ship. By nightfall, the Dry Dock blazes with floodlights. 1,400 men begin to move, 3 non-stop shifts, 8 hours each, through day and night. The noise rises like an orchestra tuning for war. Grinders shrieking, hammers clanging, rivet guns hammering through the dark. From the sky, Pearl Harbor glows like a city of fireflies. Cranes swinging steel plates through the smoke, sparks raining into the oily water below. Welders crouch beneath shattered frames, faces hidden behind masks of fire. Divers patch holes below the waterline, working by feel in blackness, guided only by the throb of air hoses. The entire shipyard feels alive, pulsing, breathing, synchronized to a single rhythm: repair or die. The men measure time not by clocks, but by cigarettes burned down to their filters, by the number of plates replaced before the shift whistle blows. Some go 48 hours without rest. Every sound becomes music. The clatter of wrenches, the hiss of acetylene, the heavy thud of chains tightening around hull plates. Sparks dance off steel like orange snow. A young welder wipes soot from his eyes and says, half to himself, "Every hammer strike is a heartbeat against the clock." And he's right. The Yorktown is no longer just a ship. She's a promise to sailors who never came home from Pearl, to every man working under those lights, to a nation that refuses to surrender. By the second dawn, Pearl Harbor has become a forge. The glow from floodlights paints the clouds orange. Every shadow moves like a ghost of December 7th. But this time, the hands of the men are not fighting flames. They are building through them. Inside the hangar deck, cranes swing giant steel ribs into place. Sparks rain over sailors guiding torches along fractured beams. You can smell the burnt paint and hear the steady ping-ping of rivet guns echoing through the metal corridors. It is the music of determination. Engineers crawl through ventilation shafts to reconnect power lines. Electricians pull new cables across decks warped by bomb hits. The sound of their work blends with the rhythmic pulse of pumps pushing seawater out of the hull. The ship breathes again. At the center of it all, Captain Buckmaster walks slowly through the chaos. His uniform is streaked with soot. He stops beside a sailor replacing shattered catapult gears and asks, "How long?" The man grins without looking up. "Before the Admiral's clock runs out, sir." Below, welders carve glowing seams into fresh steel. Their faces, lit by firelight, could be statues cast in copper. They don't speak much. Each one knows the weight of the hourglass above them. On the pier, Gillette checks the progress chart. A map of red grease pencil lines, marking tasks completed, like a battle plan against time itself. He hasn't slept in 2 days. When someone tells him to rest, he just shakes his head. You rest when she sails. By the 50th hour, the miracle begins to take shape. The holes along the port side are sealed. New sections of deck gleam under floodlight. The island tower, once blackened and crooked, now stands straight again. Reporters would later say Yorktown looked patched together with willpower. But every victory has a cost. Men collapse beside their tools, snatching minutes of sleep against the bulkheads. Coffee runs out. Hands bleed through gloves. Yet no one leaves. At the 70-hour mark, the last inspection team walks the length of the flight deck. They mark each repair with white chalk. Okay. The word repeats down the line. Okay. 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 A signal travels to the bridge. At 6 p.m., May 30th, 1942, engines deep in the hull rumble to life. Diesel smoke curls into the evening sky. A low horn sounds across the harbor. Civilians along the docks stop to watch. The Yorktown is moving under her own power. The workers cheer, voices hoarse from 3 days of smoke and shouting. Some climb the railings just to see her slip past, half reborn, half scarred. The ship moves slowly, but steady, as if testing her own resurrection. From the bridge, Buckmaster salutes the men lining the pier. Floodlights glint off his cap. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. The sound of engines speaks louder than any speech. Admiral Nimitz watches from the command tower. Behind his glasses, his eyes glisten with pride. He turns to an aide and murmurs, "They said 90 days. They did it in 3. As the carrier disappears toward the horizon, the dock workers stand in silence. Only the clang of empty oil drums remains, echoing through the yard like the toll of a bell. No one there can yet know what waits at Midway, the ambush, the explosions, the fate that will claim her again. For now, the only thing that matters is this moment. A ship resurrected, a fleet restored, a nation reminded of its own endurance. Yorktown leaves behind the scent of steel and sweat, the glow of cooling torches, and the belief that even in war's darkest hours, creation can still outshine destruction. She has gone into the night, toward destiny, toward Midway, toward immortality. Pearl Harbor, May 28, 1942. Under the blinding glow of arc lamps, USS Yorktown lies inside dry dock number 1, a mountain of steel and exhaustion. The air smells of oil, ozone, and wet metal. From above, she looks less like a ship and more like a patient in surgery. 3 bombs, each weighing nearly 800 kilograms, had ripped through her flight deck during the Battle of the Coral Sea. One tore straight through the hangar and exploded below, shattering frames and rupturing fuel lines. Another detonated near the island tower, gutting the communications center. The last hit forward, opening a wound wide enough to swallow a jeep. Inside those holes, engineers crawl like surgeons inside arteries of steel. Floodlights hang from girders, dripping with condensation. The sound is constant. The hiss of torches, the thud of rivet guns, the grinding of saws against warped plating. To the side of the dry dock, pumps roar night and day, pushing out 3,000 tons of seawater still trapped inside the ship's belly. Hoses as thick as tree trunks snake down into the lower decks, sucking the brine away. It is a fight not just against damage, but against time, rust, and exhaustion. Chief Engineer Claude Gillette paces with a clipboard and stopwatch. His handwriting is a blur of numbers and arrows. Every hour, new figures appear, tons removed, welds completed, cables replaced. He doesn't care for speeches. His only language is progress. "We've got 1,400 men," he tells a reporter who somehow wandered into the yard. "And each of them is buying a minute of time for the Pacific Fleet." Each man works in 16-hour rotations, 3 shifts that never end. When one group steps off, another steps in. Even the night looks like day beneath the floodlights. Sparks fall from the scaffolding like orange rain, settling on the shoulders of men too busy to notice. They replace entire sections of the flight deck with steel scavenged from scrap yards. Torn plates from old destroyers, stripped girders from wrecks of December 7th. Every piece, no matter how rough, is melted, hammered, and fitted into Yorktown's bones. Below deck, electricians pull out miles of cable burnt black from the bomb blasts. They spool a new wire. 500 electrical lines replaced by hand. 70 conduits are rerouted through spaces never designed to hold them. Some men lie on their backs for hours, elbows deep in junction boxes, no bigger than a helmet. Welders seal the seams one spark at a time. 1,200 welds, each one checked and stamped. The rhythm of their work is hypnotic. The sound of hammering and steel echoes off the dry dock walls like a drum beat. Overhead, the cranes never stop moving. One lowers a new ventilation duct. Another swings a section of armor plate into position. The choreography is perfect. One wrong move, and a ton of metal could crush the men below. But they dance between the danger, guided by instinct and trust. At the coordination office, Navy Yard officers, Seabees, and civilian engineers stand shoulder to shoulder. Maps and blueprints line the walls. Every hour they gather under a single clock, updating progress markers in red pencil. Each completed task pushes the hand closer to an impossible deadline: 72 hours. The math is staggering: 90,000 man-hours in just 3 days. Yorktown's resurrection consumes enough energy to power a city. Across the Pacific, Japanese carriers at Kure Naval Arsenal are undergoing minor repairs. But theirs will take months. The difference isn't luck. It's system, speed, and the will of thousands of men who refuse to lose. One worker scrawls graffiti on a steel plate before it's welded shut. "We'll see you at Midway." By the second night, the dock looks like daylight, floodlights blazing, shadows gone. Men eat standing up, wiping sweat with rags black from soot. A cook walks the deck with buckets of coffee, shouting, "Hot black fuel! Get your fuel!" Every drop of caffeine, every weld, every shout is part of the same heartbeat. A single living organism called Yorktown. And slowly, she begins to respond. The pumps quiet, the list corrects. The smell of burning oil gives way to the faint scent of heated paint. The hum of electricity returns. For the first time since Coral Sea, lights flicker on inside her control rooms. One engineer smiles, eyes red from the arc light. She's breathing again. The morning of May 29th, 1942. A warm wind blows in from the Pacific, carrying the smell of salt and diesel. The sun climbs over Pearl Harbor, and the Yorktown still glows beneath floodlights that have never gone out. For nearly 2 days, she has lived in artificial daylight, every surface alive with movement. By now, 90,000 man-hours have been compressed into less than 48. A rhythm has taken hold, the heartbeat of industry at war. Everywhere you look, men work like parts of one vast machine. A welder replaces a frame without looking up. A diver climbs from the dry dock, dripping oil and seawater, clutching a wrench in one hand and a sandwich in the other. A team of Seabees drags a replacement propeller shaft into place, its weight measured in tons, its purpose measured in hope. There is no room for error. No speeches, no complaints. Just the hiss of cutting torches and the echo of rivet guns bouncing off the water. In a small office overlooking the dock, Admiral Nimitz studies a chart covered in red ink. Each mark representing a task completed. The red line has crawled across the page faster than anyone believed possible. He says nothing, but the corners of his mouth lift. He knows the Pacific will have 3 carriers again. Outside, Claude Gillette coordinates with Navy Yard engineers. His voice, hoarse and cracked, barks through a bullhorn. Shift rotation. Bring in the next crew. No breaks till she floats. Nearby, an officer tallies numbers aloud for the logbook. 1,200 welds completed. 500 power lines replaced. 70 conduits rerouted. Each number is a story, a mark of sweat, heat, and exhaustion turned into steel. The Yorktown's wounds are closing. From the smashed hull plating to the burned-out radar room, every inch is touched by human hands. Men hang from scaffolds 40 feet above the deck, swinging hammers, guiding cables, cutting away the old and bolting in the new. At night, the yard turns into a galaxy of sparks. The floodlights create halos around the cranes. The sound of machinery drowns out conversation, yet somehow, They understand one another. A machinist wipes soot from his forehead and murmurs, "Feels like the whole country's down here with us." He's right. Every stroke of the hammer, every twist of a wrench echoes far beyond Pearl Harbor. These men are not just repairing a ship. They are restoring America's reach across the Pacific. At the tool depot, one clerk runs out of new steel bolts. Instead, he pulls spares from the hull of an old destroyer, saying, "She'll lend her bones to Yorktown now." Scrap becomes salvation. The math of the miracle is staggering. In 3 days, 1,400 men will complete the equivalent of 3 months' work at any Japanese dockyard. While the Kure Naval Arsenal in Japan needs 10 weeks to patch minor carrier damage, Pearl Harbor does it in 72 hours. Industrial arithmetic becomes poetry. Yorktown's 3 days equal Japan's 3 months. What makes it possible isn't just manpower, it's the system. The Navy Yard operates like an orchestra. Each trade, welders, electricians, fitters, painters, plays its part with precision. Orders flow down from Gillette's clipboard to foremen on the deck, then to men on their knees under dripping pipes. No one asks if it can be done anymore. The only question is when. By the end of the second night, the engines, silent since Coral Sea, are ready for their first test. Chief Machinist's Mate Donald McLeod, his hands blackened with oil, leans over the throttle. "Let's wake her up," he says. The first turn of the starter growls like thunder. Blue smoke curls from the funnels. Every man nearby freezes, staring as if watching a heart begin to beat. The deck vibrates. Loose bolts rattle in toolboxes. A deep metallic hum fills the dried dock, low, steady, alive. Then comes a sound that no one will ever forget. The deep, rolling whistle of power returning to steel. Yorktown's engines are breathing again. Men cheer, but only for a moment. There's still more to do. Fuel lines to reconnect, antennas to raise, propellers to test. Yet, for the first time, hope feels real. When the work whistle blows, no one moves. They just stare at the ship that shouldn't have lived, a ship the enemy had already buried in reports. One sailor whispers, "They thought she was dead." Another replies, "They'll find out she isn't." And as midnight approaches, the Yorktown's lights flicker across the water. A ghost turned living, her reflection shimmering beneath the stars. May 30th, 1942, the final day. Pearl Harbor wakes beneath a thin morning mist. The sea is still, reflecting the cranes like skeletons against the dawn. Inside the dry dock, the Yorktown no longer looks wounded. She looks reborn. Her patched hull gleams faintly under a new coat of gray paint, still wet to the touch. The floodlights have dimmed, but the glow of determination remains. Men stretch sore shoulders, rinse soot from their hands, and return to their posts without orders. There are no cheers, no speeches, only quiet resolve. The last checks begin. Electricians run final tests on the generators. Signalmen climb the island tower to reinstall antennas and radar masts. Mechanics test the elevators that will soon race squadrons of aircraft back into the light. Down below, the air is hot and heavy. Chief Machinist's Mate Donald McLeod stands with his team in the engine room. The gauges shimmer in the dim light. He runs a hand along the throttle, scarred from the Coral Sea fire. "She's ready, boys. Let's see if she still remembers how to fight." The order passes through the decks. "Prepare to start engines." Men step back. For a breath, the shipyard falls silent. Then, a deep rumble rolls through the hull. The turbines begin to turn. Steam hisses through pipes. Vibrations crawl up the bulkheads. like the pulse of a giant awakening. On the dock, engineers look at one another, disbelieving. Blue smoke curls from the funnels. The air shivers with power. Yorktown's heart is beating again. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz arrives to witness the moment. He doesn't stand on ceremony, his hat in hand, his uniform stained with salt. He knows what he's seeing isn't just a ship moving again, it's an idea. The proof that America can repair, rebuild, and return faster than its enemy can destroy. Reporters from Honolulu are escorted onto the pier. One of them asks a worker how long the job took. The man, face streaked with oil, laughs. 3 days, no nights. Another shouts, "You think she'll make Midway?" The worker wipes his hands on his coveralls, squints toward the ship, and says, "She has to. We built her for that inside the coordination office. The last number is written in ink. 72 hours equals 90,000 man-hours." Someone pins a note beside it. Not bad for the impossible. By late afternoon, the sun breaks through the haze. Painters scramble along the hull, brushing on the final strokes. On the bridge, Captain Elliot Buckmaster walks the deck, nodding to each crewman he passes. His face is drawn, eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights. But there is pride in every step. He pauses by the railing, looking down at the men on the dock, the welders, riggers, electricians, seabees. Their clothes stiff with soot and salt. Some are barely 20, others are old enough to be their fathers. Together, they have defied arithmetic. Buckmaster raises a hand. The workers look up, silent. A gust of wind lifts the stars and stripes atop the island tower. It flutters, torn but whole. At 6 p.m., a whistle blows. The gates of dry dock number 1 open. Water floods in, foaming white around the ship's hull. The Yorktown shudders, then begins to rise. Slow, steady, alive. Engines roar. The deck vibrates. The sound echoes across the harbor like thunder answering prayer. Dock workers cheer, their voices rough and raw. Men toss helmets into the air. The ground shakes with stamping boots and laughter. Nimitz watches quietly. He turns to Gillette and says softly, "They said 90 days. Then after a pause, "You did it in 3. Gillette doesn't reply. He just nods, eyes glassy under the glow of the dock lights. As Yorktown eases from the dock, the whistles of nearby ships rise in salute. Long, mournful notes that roll across the water. Civilians gather along the shore, waving. Children climb on fences for a better view. They don't understand the details, the hours, the welding, the exhaustion. But they can feel it. Something mighty has come back to life. The carrier moves slowly past Battleship Row, past the silent hulks of the Arizona and Oklahoma. Survivors on the pier remove their caps. For them, this is more than machinery. It's vindication. As the Yorktown turns toward the open sea, her engines rumble steady, defiant. The smoke trailing from her funnels catches the last red light of sunset. She is scarred, patched, and imperfect, and utterly beautiful. At 6 p.m., May 30th, 1942, the log will later read, Yorktown moved under her own power again. The miracle is complete. 3 days, 1 ship, 90,000 hours, and a nation's heart welded into steel. June 4th, 1942, Midway Atoll. Dawn comes gray and cold. The sea is calm, the sky wide and innocent. But below that calm stretches the deadliest ambush in naval history. At 4:30 in the morning, Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu launch the first strike. Bombs whistle down over the tiny island of Midway, shattering runways and radar huts. Plumes of fire bloom against the horizon. In the command room aboard Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's flagship, reports flow in. Everything is going as planned. America, he believes, has only 2 operational carriers left, Enterprise and Hornet. The third, Yorktown, is resting at the bottom of the Coral Sea. But the ocean, that day, carries a secret. Hundreds of miles northeast of Midway, 3 American carriers lie in wait. Not 2, 3. When the first Japanese reconnaissance plane spots them at 10:25 a.m., the report that crackles across the radio sounds almost confused. 3 enemy carriers sighted. Repeat, 3 carriers on the Japanese bridge. Silence. Then disbelief. How can that be? One officer mutters. The Yorktown is sunk. But she is not. Barely 5 days after her miracle repair, USS Yorktown has returned to the Pacific, patched, bruised, and burning for payback. Her flight deck still bears the scars of Coral Sea. Her crew works among steel plates still warm from the welder's torch. But her heart, her spirit, beats steady. At 10:30, Yorktown launches her first wave. Douglas SBD, dauntless dive bombers and Grumman Wildcat fighters scream into the clouds. Pilots tighten gloves, glance at photographs taped to their dashboards, and dive into history. Minutes later, their shadows fall over the Japanese fleet. The sky turns white with anti-aircraft bursts. The Dauntlesses roll and dive, plunging straight through the black smoke. At 10:25, the first American bombs find their marks. In less than 5 minutes, Akagi, Kagu, and Soryu erupt into towers of fire. The Japanese formation collapses in chaos, flames rising, planes exploding before they can take off. On board the Soryu, sailors leap into burning water as secondary explosions ripple through her hangar. A Japanese officer later writes in his diary, "The enemy's bombs fell like rain, precise, merciless." How many Yorktowns do they have? By noon, 3 of Japan's 4 carriers are gone. The Pacific, the vast ocean Yamamoto thought he commanded, has shifted beneath his feet. But the battle isn't finished. At 2 p.m., the last surviving Japanese carrier, Hiryu, launches a counterstrike. 24 Aichi D-3A Val dive bombers rise into the sunlight, guided by a single objective: find and destroy the American carrier still fighting hardest. They find her. At 3:20, Yorktown's lookouts cry, "Enemy dive bombers, port side." The sky fills with descending specks, the flash of wings, the shriek of engines. Captain Elliot Buckmaster stands on the bridge, shouting orders as flak bursts in the air. "Hard to port! Launch all fighters, it's too late." The first bomb hits near the island tower, tearing through the flight deck. Flames roar across the planking. A second bomb follows, smashing into the hangar below. Fire races through fuel lines. The ship shakes under the impact. Men are thrown from their posts, sliding through oil and smoke. A third hit knocks out power. The carrier lurches to a stop. Darkness spreads through her interior. Below deck, McLeod and his machinists fight to keep the engines alive. They wade through knee-deep water, sealing leaks with their own hands. Pumps roar, but the ship is dying. Buckmaster looks across the deck, his ship in flames, his crew fighting shadows, and knows the truth. Yorktown won't survive another hit. But she has done her job. The attack that was meant to crush the Pacific Fleet has failed. Because of her. He turns to the bridge crew. "Signal Enterprise. Tell them we've bought them time as smoke thickens. Yorktown's planes, those that can still fly, land on Enterprise's deck. Her airmen salute the burning ship as they pass overhead. Yorktown lists slowly to port. Fire creeps toward her magazines. The order is given. Abandon ship. But even as the last men climb into lifeboats, her guns still thunder, firing at phantom targets in the smoke. She will not die quietly. June 5th, 1942. The smoke of battle still drifts across the Pacific. The sea is littered with fragments of two navies, twisted metal, empty rafts, and the faint smell of burned fuel carried for miles. Yorktown drifts helplessly, her list growing with every wave. The once proud flight deck now lies silent, warped and blackened. The sound of hammers and engines has faded. Only the hiss of steam and the crackle of fire remain. Nearby destroyers, Hamann, Balch, and Anderson, rush to her aid. Lifeboats weave between patches of oil, hauling survivors from the water. Men cough, blink through smoke, and look back toward the ship they loved. Even half submerged, she still looks alive, defiant. By evening, fires are under control. Salvage crews climb aboard with pumps and cables. Their mission, save her again. They believe they can. If any ship deserves another miracle, it is Yorktown. The next day, June 6th, the sea turns glass calm. The smell of diesel and salt hangs heavy. Lines stretch from the destroyer Hamann to Yorktown's hull. Pumps rumble, draining the flooded compartments. Men move cautiously over decks still hot from the day before. For a moment, hope flickers. The list begins to ease. A few officers smile for the first time in days. Then, fate arrives beneath the waves. At 1:29 p.m., sonar operators aboard Hamann pick up a faint echo. Too late. The Japanese submarine I-168 has slipped through the screen. 4 torpedoes streak toward the wounded carrier. 2 hit Yorktown, 1 strikes Hamann amidships. The explosion rips the smaller destroyer in half. She goes down in less than 4 minutes, her depth charges detonating as she sinks. The blast slams into Yorktown's side, tearing new holes through her patched skin. Men are thrown into the air. The sea turns black with fuel and debris. The carrier lurches, trembling. Steel screams. Water floods through the lower decks faster than the pumps can fight. The salvage crew has no choice but to abandon her. They climb down ropes slick with oil, the heat of the steel burning their hands. From their rafts, they watch Yorktown roll slowly onto her port side. The flag still flies, its stars smeared with soot, fluttering in the faint wind. At 7 a.m. on June 7th, Yorktown gives her last breath. Her bow rises once, tilts, and slides beneath the surface with a low, steady sigh. Air bursts through the waves as she disappears into the dark. No cheers, no fanfare, only silence. For the men who served her, the sound is unbearable. They watch the bubbles fade as if a heartbeat has stopped. Yet they know what she has given them and what she has bought. Because while she dies, the battle is already won. 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, are gone. 250 Japanese aircraft destroyed. Hundreds of veteran pilots lost. Yamamoto's dream of controlling the Pacific sinks with them. Admiral Raymond Spruance, now commanding the American task force, signals the fleet. The enemy is retreating. Victory is ours. On the Japanese side, disbelief turns to despair. Intercepted radio logs carry fragments of shock. How many Yorktowns do they have? We destroyed her, and she returned. In Tokyo, Yamamoto writes in his war diary, "The enemy's industrial power and spirit exceed all expectation." The miracle of 72 hours has become the turning point of the Pacific War. Yorktown's loss is mourned, but her sacrifice changes everything. Because of her endurance, the Enterprise and Hornet survived to fight again. Because of her delay, Japan's counterattack collapses. And because of her example, Every shipwright and sailor from San Diego to Boston now believes the impossible can be done. Weeks later, when reporters ask Nimitz what turned the tide at Midway, he simply says, "The courage of our pilots and the hands that rebuilt Yorktown." For the men of the shipyard, those words are enough. They know their story began not with glory, but with sweat, heat, and a deadline no one believed possible. And it ended here, in a calm sea, under an empty sky, with a ship that refused to die quietly. In the years to come, divers will find her resting upright on the seafloor, 3 miles down, her flag still carved into the steel. A silent monument to every hand that welded, every man that fought, every life she carried. She went down fighting, but not before she changed the course of the Pacific. The Pacific Ocean. Silent, endless, eternal. Nearly 3 miles beneath its surface, in water black as night, lies the USS Yorktown. Her hull rests upright on the seabed, still proud, still whole. The steel that once shook with engines now sleeps in perfect stillness. Around her, fish glide through open hangars. The elevator shafts are quiet. The flight deck, once alive with smoke, fire, and courage, is now a garden of coral and silence. For more than half a century, she remained lost. A ghost in the dark, her position marked only by memory and maps blurred by time. Then, in 1998, oceanographer Dr. Robert Ballard, the same man who found the Titanic, led a deep-sea expedition to search for her. Using robotic submersibles, his team scanned the ocean floor west of Midway. On a cold May morning, the sonar drew a shape across the screen. Long, angled, unmistakable. As the cameras descended into the abyss, the first image appeared. The outline of a flight deck, the faded letters Yorktown, barely visible through the gloom. The men on Ballard's ship fell silent. After 56 years, the carrier that refused to die had been found. Ballard's log that day recorded just one line. She sits upright, as if waiting for her crew to come back. The discovery made headlines around the world. But for veterans who had served aboard her, and for the welders, engineers, and shipyard hands who once rebuilt her, it was more than news. It was closure. Yorktown had returned once more, not to war, but to memory. Her story became more than a tale of battle. It became a lesson written in steel and time. Speed of repair equals survival. After World War II, that doctrine reshaped the U.S. Navy. The concept of damage control, rapid response, modular repair, cross-trained crews all traced their roots to the frantic 72 hours in May 1942. The miracle at Pearl Harbor became the blueprint for every shipyard that followed. Today, every American carrier operates with teams whose first duty is not just to fight, but to keep fighting. Their manuals carry the Yorktown's legacy in quiet phrases. Immediate containment. Prioritize propulsion. Protect the heart. These are not just procedures. They are lessons learned in fire. Historians call Midway the turning point of the Pacific War. But the Yorktown's real legacy lies in what came after. In the understanding that courage alone cannot win a modern war. Victory in the industrial age belongs to those who can think, build, and rebuild faster than their enemies can destroy. In 1942, Japan's fleet outnumbered America's. Its pilots were veterans, its ships newer. But America had something else: factories, systems, and people who refused to waste a single hour. Every weld, every shift at Pearl Harbor, every sleepless night under floodlights. That was strategy in its purest form. Not the strategy of admirals, but of men who turned exhaustion into endurance. The Yorktown became a symbol of that idea, that willpower is a resource and industry is its weapon. Her name lives on. The modern USS Yorktown CV-10, commissioned in 1943, carried her spirit through the rest of the war, from the Philippine Sea to Tokyo Bay. Today, she stands preserved in Charleston, South Carolina, a floating museum, her decks lined with the ghosts of another generation. Visitors walk her halls, read the plaques, and feel what those men once felt. Steel beneath their feet, and the hum of something larger than themselves. Yet deep beneath the Pacific, the original still waits. The currents pass gently over her bow. The flag is gone, but the spirit remains. Every few years, a Navy remotely operated vehicle revisits her site. Each time, the cameras show the same haunting image. The hull intact, the anchor chain still taut, the bridge windows gazing into darkness. It is as if she is still on station, guarding the sea she helped to save. And maybe she is, because Yorktown's story is not about what was lost, but about what was built, rebuilt, and remembered. It's about men who believed that 3 days could change history, and proved it true. The sea remembers. Long after the guns have fallen silent, its depths still hold the echoes of courage and steel. Years after the Battle of Midway, Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, the man who once led the attack on Pearl Harbor, would write, "We thought we had sunk her twice, but America rebuilt her faster than we could understand." He was talking about the USS Yorktown, the carrier that refused to die. She went down, yes, but not before she resurrected a fleet, rewrote a strategy, and restored a nation's belief in itself. From the smoke of the Coral Sea to the waves above Midway, Yorktown proved that strength is not measured by perfection, but by the will to rise again. Her story isn't just history. It's a reminder that in every era, against every odds, resilience can rebuild what courage alone cannot. Because every battle leaves a record, and it's up to us to keep it alive. Subscribe and remember what they built, what they fought for, and what still endures.